Good afternoon, everyone. We're very glad to see you in our third dialogue of Living Innovation project. Today, in our series for challenges of remote working, we will talk about holograms and virtual reality. And we will wait for 2 minutes only to let all registered participants to join the meeting. And in these 2 minutes while we're waiting, I would invite you to write where are you from, if you wish, like what is the weather like at your place and what is your name, of course. I will start first. My name is Svetlana and I'm in Italy, actually in Rome. And we had really nice weather today. We have Mexico City now with also sunny weather. Paris, London.
I'm in London. This is Armen. I'm in London. It's a little bit grey, but you can feel spring coming and you can feel slowly the blossom starting to come on the trees. We're getting there.
Thank you, Armen. Sounds good. We have people from Germany, Berkeley, Vienna, from people from Hamburg and Munich, raining in Munich. Hungary, very glad to see Hungary. I've studied there. Spain.
And from the today sunny southern Austria, right?
Nice. Hello. Francisca from Germany. Hello. Okay, we're 63% and I think we can start. Madeleine, could you please share the screen? Thank you. So today we have our meeting dedicated to holograms and virtual reality. We have this dialogue and it's a third dialogue in the series for challenges of remote working for Living Innovation project. Couple of words on technical aspects of this meeting. First, I will introduce myself again. My name is Svetlana Ivanova, and I'm researcher at ISINOVA, Institute of Studies for the Integration of Systems. And as I said, we are based in Rome, in Italy. And together with me, moderate the dialogue today, Andre Martinuzzi. Professor Martinuzzi is a coordinator of the Living Innovation Project and director of the Institute for Management Sustainability. So a few remarks technical for today. We will use mainly the chat function for the questions and already you actively use it for our short greeting on where are we from and what is the weather like. So you know how to do it. In case you will just see the chat box and you can type the questions there. We will then pre-select this question and read them out loud during the discussion. Please mute yourself during the presentation of our speakers to avoid background noise. And if you feel like switching on the camera, we would be very glad to see you. So yeah, please go ahead if you feel like, especially for the discussion part, which we will have later. And also, if you do not feel well with the fact that this meeting is recorded, you could also join us in YouTube. Otherwise, we will go on here. And we already said 72 participants, actually. We will start with introduction, which Professor Martinuzzi, Andre will do together with me. And we will have slight changes in agenda. Unfortunately, Simon Benson had a personal emergency, so he could not join us today. But we will still have introduction on what is virtual and extended reality. And Armen Ovanessoff, who also speaker today, will take this part. After that, Larry O'Reilly will talk about very new and interesting technology. He's actually connected from Canada today, and he will talk about holographic telepresence and what it can do. After that, Armen Ovanessoff will take his presentation on with building a responsible future for immersive technologies, where he also enlightened about the risks of these new technologies. After that, we will have question and answers. As I told you, we will use chat for this. So during the presentation, please go ahead and write your questions. We will reply maybe some part in chat and some other, depending on time, we will read them and direct to the right speaker. After question and answers in this main session, we will have a conversation session. One will remain in this main session, and another one you will have to only click the button, which I will explain later how we will do it. And this is rather informal talk with the speakers, with Larry O'Reilly and with Armen Ovanessoff, where you would be able to address the questions personally, and we could exchange the experiences on these technologies. Andre,
yes, hello.
To you.
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, good night, wherever you join us from. My name is Andre Martinuzzi. I would like to briefly introduce you to the Living Innovation Project. This is the project that allows us to run this event today, this series of events. It's a European project funded by the European Commission, started 3 years ago. And actually, it's a super nice playground for responsible innovation. We designed it as a playground. We had the impression that when we talk about responsibility and responsible innovation, many companies are a little bit hesitant. They know that they suffer from pressure from international, fast increasing competition. Competing for the next big thing is something that puts a lot of pressure in the companies. And when you then talk about responsibility, many companies say, what else should I do? Well, I have to innovate, I have to compete, I have to take care of the next big thing, I have to take care about needs and consumers and technologies and competitors at the same time. You want to talk about responsibility. Well, we have so many challenges to solve, we will take care about later on. So they perceive responsible innovation in many cases as an additional burden, as a threat. And we said, no, responsible innovation is an opportunity. And we want to showcase to companies that responsible innovation allows them for more innovative innovation, for avoiding sunken costs, for more opportunities. And this is why we teamed up with 14 partners from different companies and also from the research sector. You see that Siemens, Telefonica, Infineon, Ottobock, Ericsson, companies that you probably know. All of these are digitalization companies. So you could say the digital sector, Atos as well. So all the companies you see there with the logos, they teamed up in this project because they wanted to explore the business opportunities of responsible innovation. And holographic telepresence and virtual reality, augmented reality is one of these. We have other tracks as well dealing with other issues. So the Living Innovation Project offers a broad diversity, a broad bundle of opportunities, and remote working and holography and virtual reality is just one of them. So if you're interested in all the others, just visit livinginnovation.net. And we will also have some upcoming events that we would like to tell you about. And perhaps we should also briefly look back what we've done before. Svetlana, what did we do before? This is our third dialogue. What happened before?
Yes, today our third dialogue, and we started actually in November with our first one on technologies and leadership challenges. We took this broad argument in the very beginning to address the leadership challenges which everybody facing now. And we learned there how to lead virtual teams, what are the challenges in virtual teams, what are emerging technologies which could be used to facilitate this work, and what role actually policy can play in this. After that, in February, we took artificial intelligence technology and see how trust and surveillance are interrelated to this. So we talk about what is trust and how trust-based leadership can be established, about resilient organization, taking network analysis to see how these trust networks can be effectively established. And we talk about responsible surveillance, where a speaker from Microsoft talk about these technologies and how they're used. And today we are in our meeting about holograms and virtual reality. So Andre, please.
In case you're interested in the previous dialogues, there are some recordings of the previous dialogues on YouTube. So if you want to know more about these leadership challenges, the trust, the surveillance, the AI stuff, you can revisit the dialogues on YouTube.
And also you'll find the links on the Live in Innovation platform.
Yeah. And next slide, please. There will be the next one. So this is the short outlook. In mid-April, we will discuss skills and careers in remote working. So it's not so much about technology now, then it's about brainware. We already have 2 confirmed speakers, one from McKinsey, who wrote a very interesting report recently on the future of work, and Barbara Stöttinger, who's Dean of the Executive Academy at my university and who can talk about skills and careers as well. If you are an expert in skills careers in remote working, let us know. Could be even you who would be the 3rd speaker. Then we still look for a 3rd speaker. If you know anybody who's a brilliant speaker on skills careers, remote working, if it's you, if it's a friend of you, if it's a colleague of you, just let us know. So, responsible innovation, I already mentioned it briefly before. When we talk about responsible innovation, it makes sense to have a clearer view. What does it mean? There is a story that we developed about responsibility and innovation, and actually it means 3 things. It means to take care about future impacts. This is what responsibility is about. And when we talk to companies, the term corporate social responsibility is quite well known to many of them. And when we ask them, what do you understand by corporate social responsibility? They say, we take care for our impacts. We consider our impacts, the impacts of our products, the impacts of our technologies. And now responsible innovation just means also to take care about the future impacts of any new product, technology, service, innovation, whatever. It means also to reduce risks and costs, because if I take care about impacts, I can avoid such cases as, you remember perhaps Contagan in the 1960s, you remember asbestos, you remember Google Glass that did not succeed because of not taking care of future risks. And there are other innovations that might also lead to sunken costs if they are not carefully implemented, taking care of impacts. And there are some technologies that we are well aware of. Technology assessment, for example, takes care of predicting to a certain extent. Forecasting, foresight is also an instrument in this context about future impacts, and the societal benefit is to avoid negative impacts. The second aspect of responsible innovation is the participation aspect. It's the responsibility towards the stakeholders. Actually, it means to innovate with the people and for the people. Now, you might say you already do that in your company. You might say you are well aware of open innovation. Now, then I would ask you, with whom do you innovate? Whom do you invite in your open innovation processes? And many companies say, well, actually, honestly speaking, we invite our employees and their families. And then they complain about not having the full inspiration they could get. So perhaps responsible innovation means to open the doors a little bit more, and also to involve the unusual suspects, not the techno nerds, which are lead users, which are highly interested in new technology, but also involve people who are not the usual suspects, and to innovate together with them. Could be an interesting question how virtual reality could also be used for people who are not so wealthy and not so rich that they could afford such a high tech at home. Third aspect, and that's the last one, responsibility about the whole system. Actually, we live nowadays in systems, we're surrounded by systems, the financial system, the food system, the mobility system, whatever. And these systems in many cases simply emerged. Nobody designed them on purpose. Nobody said, let's design a food system. It emerged by the individual decisions of individual companies, individual entrepreneurs, whatever. But the whole system might be counterproductive. We've seen that when the financial crisis hit first the US, then Europe, that this system just broke apart, but nobody thought about that this could happen. So it was not designed with this point, it emerged with this point. And recreating systems, redesigning systems in a responsible way means responsible innovation, which means to innovate at a higher level. It means to design whole ecosystems. And this is a challenge for collaboration. This cannot be done by a single company alone. This has to be done in networks. So the interesting thing is how to empower networks, how to empower groups of companies to innovate together. And this is also the reason why we've taken smart homes as this application of our wonderful Living Innovation project, because we saw that the way we live together, live at home in 2030 is not an issue that one company alone can design. It can just be done together, and it involves whole systems. So this was a crash course in responsible innovation. Sorry for that, but as this is part of our whole project, our Living Innovation project, I think it's worth to set the stage also for our discussion today, because when we talk about augmented reality, virtual reality, and holography in remote working, we have to take care about impacts. What will be future impacts? We have to take care about people, and we have to take care about whole systems. So, now, before we go into our discussion, next slide, please, I would like to ask you two questions. I would like to get to know you a little bit, not that everybody introduces himself or herself. We are 82 now, which is marvelous. And if everybody would introduce himself, it would take much too long. But what I would like to know is, have you ever experienced virtual reality, augmented reality, or holograms? If yes, briefly share your experiences in the chat box. Just write a sentence. Short, not just a keyword, not yes, because then we know that what your name is and you experience it. That would not be detailed enough, but also not a long description. We don't need what did you do? How did it happen? And wonderful. Sibylle Kneisel already said it made her dizzy in an Apple shop. Games, only in video games. Let us know. What was your experience? Some people have Oculus. Some people go to roller coasters. Wonderful. You do your own Oculus Quest devices. Interesting. Gaming.
Livano actually says that the company develops communication system based on hologram technology. And we have nice flight through Linz and Ars Electronica, great experience. Some people actually work in this sector for augmented reality. And some research showcase were organized, so got introduced to this technology.
What a wonderful and interesting group. We have a lot of people who already use this technology, a lot of people who even work on this technology. What a wonderful group. Great.
Or develop it, yes.
Yeah, well, thank you very much for attending this, because now we have a very, very, very smart group. So when we talk about crowd intelligence, this is a super intelligent crowd. So the next question now to you is, next slide, please. What benefits do you think that holograms and virtual reality could bring to remote working? And what challenges do you expect? So you used it in gaming, you used it in certain specific areas, Ars Electronica, Virtual Mind Tour. That's nice, but if we apply it in a remote working context, what benefits, what challenges do you expect? Trainings, okay.
Well, you're saying that AR is the benefit, but VR and holograms are too immersive. Fatigue and motion sickness. I think this is something very common to hear. Mm-hmm. Emergency medical services for telemed purposes. Social connection, indeed, in our times.
Effects on the psyche. Okay. Zoom fatigue. Yes, wouldn't it be great to meet now? That would be
dreams.
wonderful.
These are dreams, Andre.
Sibylle Kneisel said there might be a benefit or a challenge to relax. Now, I don't get it. Please, Sibylle Kneisel, could you tell us just in written if you think that relaxing is the challenge or the benefit? Remote awareness of environments and spaces you can walk through.
Collaborative work, of course. This is what we actually, they started to use it for remote work, having difficulties to collaborate.
So there seem to be already a lot of applications out there. There's relaxation could be the benefit in an otherwise too busy world. So this is then the kind of virtual reality retreat where 1 hour during lunchtime you fly through islands that you've never seen before and then relax. Okay, didn't think about that. Interesting. Telemedicine, a lot of applications. Teletabiland. Ah, okay. Well, it reminds me, it's not augmented reality, but I like to play 10 years, 15 years ago, a game that was called Mist and Riven. Perhaps some of you might remember. And I played it so intensively that next summer, when I was walking on the countryside in the forests, I thought, looks like Riven. And I thought, that's the wrong way. I should have thought in Riven looks like countryside. But it was totally the other way around. So it shaped my expectation, it shaped my worldview. And I thought, oh, that's so nice. It just looks like Riven. So perhaps it might change our world when we relax in Teletabiland. Wonderful. Thank you very much.
And we have some concerns also about the vision that the screen using for virtual reality. And we're all in the glasses, by the way, here already.
Oh, there is Mist VR. I will check it later today. I could drop into this addiction again. Wonderful. Thank you very much. So we see there are applications, and today what we would like to talk about and what we'd like to get is an impression on what is already there, what could be done next, and we would like to discuss what we have to consider when we want to apply this on large scale in our remote working environment. And this leads us to our first presentation, which is not Simon Benson. We will see if Simon would be available for a video interview during the next 2 or 3 weeks. So perhaps we can compensate for the fact that he's not here today, that I will run a video interview with him. We are running these kind of video interviews now every week in the Living Innovation Project. Perhaps you've seen some of them. We've done one with Martin Richardson on Pioneer of Holograms already 3 weeks ago, and perhaps Simon will accept an invitation for such a video interview as well. So now we asked Armen for a brief overview on what can holography, what is holography, what is extended reality, what is virtual reality, just to give us a kind of framework to understand what we will talk about, right?
Hi yes, so thank you very much, Armen, for taking up for this. Armen Ovanessoff is the Principal Director at Accenture Research. And yeah, he nicely join us to give also these few slides to give introduction to this. And then later Armen will continue with his main presentation. Thank you, Armen, and the stage is yours.
Thank you very much, Svetlana. Thank you, Andre. I'm just sharing my screen. Could you just let me know if it's okay, if you can all see?
Yes, perfectly. Thank you, Armen.
Fantastic. Thank you very much. Well, as you said, it's good to have some context. There's so many words that get thrown around, right? The virtual reality, augmented reality, mixed reality, et cetera, et cetera. When I try to make sense of it, I usually use a term, immersive technologies, to kind of encompass them all. And I try to think of them as kind of tools that use and enhance our natural senses, right? So we know virtual reality is when you are entirely immersed. So you wear the goggles, you can't see anything about anything around you in the physical world, you're entirely immersed. Augmented reality is actually the blending of the physical and the digital. So that might be through smart glasses, for example. So you can see what's in front of you and there's information overlaid. It might be videos, it might be text, whatever it is. Increasingly these days, it's the phone. So you put your phone in front of something, so you have the physical world and there's overlaid information through your phone. And just to clarify, that means that they act very differently. So if you think of training, for example, something that really came up in the conversations in the chat box, virtual reality is particularly good for social and behavioral type training because you're entirely immersed. You feel like you're somewhere else. Whereas augmented reality, you can have additional information. So you can imagine it being used for technical skills. So you might be doing some engineering or plumbing and you get more information and videos to supplement what you're doing. So you can see how actually they are very different, even though these terms get mixed up with each other. VR, virtual reality, and augmented reality get a lot of the attention, and they're really about the visual and movement, those things. But actually, if you think of the broader sense, broader human senses, there are a lot more things at play. So there's haptics increasingly, which is about the touch and feel. So you see that coming through gloves and things like that. I've spoken to companies that bring smell and even taste into the immersive experience, again, to just really widen that broader experience of what it's about and the sensations and making it truly immersive. I think the most extreme things I've seen are actually using the brain waves. So there are companies that you put a headset on the head and they read the brain waves, and you can essentially, it translates them into binary ones and zeros, and you can move physical objects just through your eye movements or through your thoughts. It's extraordinary. We several years ago we worked with a company that does this and helped a paralyzed person in a hospital to, for example, turn on the lights and off the lights, dim them, calming music, those kinds of things they could control just through their brain waves. So it's extraordinary the range of things that this covers, and hopefully that gives you an idea. Now, when I usually talk about it, I ask precisely the same question as Andre asked about how people use it. I usually ask who uses it for games, and a lot of hands go up in a room, as we saw in the chat room. And then I ask how many of you use it at work, and much fewer hands go up. And what's interesting is that right now, that is kind of the case in that gaming has traditionally been the main place where a lot of people experience this stuff, and it's where a lot of the industry spending is. But we are currently experiencing the tipping point. It's changing as we speak. So you can see there the data to 2021, but literally as we are speaking, you see industry spending growing at twice the speed, even more, and in just a few years it will be 2.5 times the spending on gaming, and that's because the technologies are reaching a stage where they are turning into real value propositions that people can actually use in the office, in the plant, in the factory, in different kind of environments. So that is literally happening as we speak. You can see that with the innovation. You know, if you look at the patent applications just from a few years ago, suddenly something changed, right? You can see there 2014, 2015, a 5-fold increase in the innovation kind of patent applications. The funding to startups in the VR, AR space, again, just massively rising suddenly just in that time. So you can see that something is happening. We're really at that tipping point where the hype is becoming more about reality and investments by companies. And there are many areas you see it. I'll just very quickly touch upon some of the more prevalent ones. Certainly, we say work productivity in, for example, research and design. Car makers use it where you're in a room and you're moving your hands and designing things, and you can actually see things happening even though you're in a virtual space. In warehouses, they use augmented reality, so smart glasses, to tell them exactly where to go, the quickest path to where they need to go, exactly how to put it on the trolley, for example, and you don't have to have a little scrap of paper that gets lost or gets messed up. So a lot of very interesting things happening there. Training is a huge one. That's really where you've seen a lot of boom. And I explained earlier the differences between virtual reality and augmented reality in different types of training. Very, very interesting things here. Consumer experience, some of you may have done this when you're buying a sofa or a kitchen, you can put your phone up and you can see the sofa superimposed on your room, and things like that to see what it would look like. Perhaps a lot of you have done that during lockdown. I think a lot of companies have upped their kind of usage of those kinds of tools. And finally, I did want to mention mental health. I know that came up very briefly in the chat box. That is huge. All kinds of therapies that use virtual reality. The example I would use is if you're in a virtual world and you put your arm in a bucket of kind of ice water in the virtual world, in the physical world, you actually feel a lot of those real symptoms, feelings from that, and they actually use that kind of pain relief, etc., in traumatic situations, post-trauma therapies, and those kinds of things. So very, very interesting things kind of happening there. And I think actually I'm going to stop there. That gives enough probably context, and I will be back in a little bit to talk more about the risks and the responsibilities that Andre really touched upon at the beginning there. I hope that helps as context.
Thank you. Thank you very much,
Armen, thank you very much. May I ask you just one or two more questions? You said there is a dramatic growth in industry that can be expected. Do you have any figures on which market segments? Is this rather the glasses? Is this rather the holography? Is there any expectation? What type of immersive experience are the ones that we can expect the biggest growth rates?
Rather than the industries rather than technologies, the things that I've noticed, and again, I haven't looked recently, and there are some recent figures out, training is one of the big ones. Training is a very, very interesting space where you have companies that, for example, I'll give you an example. Walmart has been using it for years. If you imagine just a store manager, a young store manager who has never lived through a Black Friday and the chaos that happens in a shop on a Black Friday, rather than throwing them in to that situation, they do a virtual reality kind of experience of what that's like, so that when it happens, they're much more prepared for it. Another example there would be hazardous situations like on oil rigs, that you can't replicate that in real life. And so the virtual thing is a place where you can actually go through those more hazardous situations. So definitely training is a big one. Augmented reality, like I said, the smart glasses, those things, I hear more of these use cases in warehouses and places like that. R&D, as I said, is another kind of area. Something that I find very interesting is the typical automation technologies that tend to reduce the workforce, where machines replace humans. Actually, extended reality tools do the opposite. They kind of supercharge the humans and they make them more productive. So that's, I think, a very interesting way of thinking about it.
Just one minor remark. Armen will be back in a few minutes after Larry O'Reilly's presentation. If you have any question during the upcoming presentations that comes to your mind, just post it to the chat forum, and Svetlana and I will try to bring it into the debate, and we'll try to summarize it. So whenever you have a question, just note it into the chat forum. We'll take care. Svetlana.
Thank you, Armen, and thank you, Andre. And now we go to Larry O'Reilly, who is actually Chief Executive Officer of ARTH Media. This is, he's actually connecting to us from Canada today. And ARTH Media is augmented reality holographic technology platform. And this company designs platform which allows humans to interact with human holograms created for personalized services. So Larry will talk about holographic telepresence and what it can do, what it look and feel like, advantages of holographic telepresence, and transmission options and network ecosystems of what they're working on now. Larry?
Thank you,
Please
Svetlana.
go ahead.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it. Let me share my screen here, and we can get into the presentation. Are we sharing?
Yes, we can see your screen, but not yet the presentation.
Okay.
Okay, now I see the presentation, and if you go to the slideshow, that would be perfect.
Okay, we clicked on something else. Apologies, everyone. Here we go.
Perfect.
Are we on the proper slide? Well, listen, at ARHT Media, our mission, our goal is to create memorable human connections that generate emotional impact. And our technology enables exactly that. And by that, if this is a photo of me actually presenting in Seattle, I'm standing in Toronto. This is a VIP event presentation with executives from Amazon and Microsoft and Starbucks. And you can see all the phones that are up recording the presentation, because I'm standing there life-size, lifelike, 3D without the need for 3D glasses, and there's no latency in the audio. And when you experience that, your brain is telling you that the person is actually there in the room with you. And we call that creating presence. And when you create presence, you build trust, because you have a very natural communication with either an audience member or a panelist, or all kinds of different applications. Oops. The interesting thing is, when I joined ARHT Media 3 years ago, we were presenting our holographic presentation as the next best thing to being there. And the reality is, it actually often carries more impact than presenting live and in person. We've had third-party research from our clients that have indicated that when they present holographically, they achieve higher levels of engagement, higher levels of entertainment value, but most importantly, higher levels of content retention. And because of that, they will choose, in many cases, to actually present from a distance anywhere on the planet, to present holographically to create that impact and that higher level of content retention. The other thing, and those studies have largely come from clients that are in the financial services area when they're marketing and promoting their products. Similarly, we're used frequently by the pharmaceutical industry to educate doctors and medical practitioners on devices and vaccines, et cetera. And one of the benefits that our technology brings is that you can have presenters in different locations, and they can be presenting to audiences in multiple locations at the same time. So it makes those subject matter experts dramatically more efficient with their time. We've had reports back from pharmaceutical firms that when 2 presenters were presenting in person to an audience, they typically have net promoter scores on the event between 50 and 55. When those exact same 2 presenters present holographically, the scores go into the 90s. So the impact is dramatic. Obviously, one of the benefits that we bring is the ability to reduce your carbon footprint by reducing the need to travel and still engage with the audience that you're trying to address. If everybody thinks way back, and I know it seems like forever ago, at Davos in February of last year, executive after executive got to the lectern and said, we will reduce our carbon footprint to 0 by this date. And in fact, over 30% of our inbound inquiries prior to COVID, the #1 reason they wanted to use our technology was so that they could reduce their carbon footprint. And as I mentioned before, one of the great benefits, of course, is it increases the efficiency of subject matter experts. I live in Toronto. There are times when I start my day with in-person meetings in London. I'd have 1 or 2. Then I move to New York, and I might have a meeting or 2 in New York. Then I might take a meeting in Los Angeles, and I'll end my day in either Singapore or Hong Kong without ever leaving Toronto. So obviously, people that are in great demand, it's a great meeting for that. Our software allows us to capture a person in one location, beam them anywhere else in the world with less than 0.3 seconds of latency in full 2-way communication. We can capture a person in one location, beam them to multiple locations. We can capture people in different locations, bring them on stage together where they can communicate with one another in virtually real time or seemingly real time, and the audience. And then we can take that data and feed that data out to a much broader audience. Here's our whole ecosystem, and it's, we really, our technology is all around the software that allows us to take these relatively large data packs and encrypt them and compress them and send them over the common internet, and then display them in different means. So we used just the traditional green screen capture, and we're capturing using a 4K prosumer camera. And immediately below that camera on that tripod in the middle there is a monitor where the speaker has a feed of the audience. And in some cases, we have multiple monitors with many video feeds, depending on how big the audience actually is. Next to that, there's a monitor which is a confidence monitor, so the presenter can see themselves. And in this particular case, our software is just on a high-powered laptop. And so that 4K video feed and the audio feed from the presenter is going into our server, where it's compressed and encrypted, and it's looking for ARTH Media servers elsewhere in the world. It could be like in the top right corner, which is our in-person HoloPresence display. It's designed, it's mobile, it's designed for conferences and meeting rooms and training centers and things along those lines. Or in the bottom right corner, online, in what we call the virtual global stage, where we can create a virtual environment and digitally composite the presenter and their video feeds and their PowerPoint and anything else in a virtual world. Or on the left side, we now have developed a permanent display called the HoloPod. And it takes our HoloPresence technology, it puts it into a cabinet that can be secured, it's on wheels. It's very much a plug and play type presentation where you simply plug in the power, plug in the internet, turn on the ARTH Engine server, and within a minute or two, you actually have a hologram on stage. So this is designed specifically for university lecture halls, corporate meeting rooms, corporate training centers, things along those lines. The verticals that we do most of our work: financial services, professional services, where we're beaming people from one place to another. Here's a photo of Howard Marks, who we captured in New York, and he was presenting at a conference in Singapore. The healthcare space, I mentioned pharmaceutical, is a very big area for us. We're now starting to get into the telemedicine space as well. You can imagine, as was mentioned earlier, especially in mental health, by having the full form body as opposed to a headshot, you can actually build trust with the patient that you're trying to help from a mental health perspective. The tech space in the top right, you mentioned Ericsson as one of your sponsors. They were our biggest client 2 years ago. We do an awful lot of activations where our technology is used to demonstrate the potential benefits of 5G technology. Obviously education, and we're in a number of universities. Imperial College London, the EdTech Lab, were the first to adopt our technology for both capture and display. But that list of universities is growing rapidly, and we're used in the entertainment space as well. Where the technology becomes incredibly cost efficient is by putting in permanent capture and displays in corporate offices or enterprise organizations around the world to reduce the need for corporate travel. Here's an example, a very real example with a London-based client, and they asked us to put the math together to link up 5 offices. And so the CapEx was under $100,000 per location. You can see the ongoing costs for all 5 locations. And given that their executives typically fly business class, they estimated that we would probably save them about $6.8 million a year in travel expenses, and obviously reduce their carbon footprint and make their subject matter experts that much more efficient. We're a global company. We have offices around the world, and we deal with very large brands. One of the reasons these brands use us for communications is that they get a consistency of presentation regardless of where they are in the world. So if you're designing a medical education training program to market your pharma product in the Americas, you can take that and export all of the key deliverables into Europe and into Asia and Africa and elsewhere. So I'm going to share just a couple of examples of our work, and just quite briefly. And Heike, maybe the first example I'm going to show you, given that we're in a COVID world and most of the communication we're doing right now is online. This is a snippet of a presentation that was done. It's a very typical example. So there was a European Respiratory Symposium. It was scheduled to be an in-person conference in Germany back in September. And Novartis sponsored a presentation with 3 research scientists, one in Germany, one in Greece, and one in Australia. and they used our technology so that they could each make their own individual presentations, and then they could do a panel. And so, Heike, could you maybe run that video for me, please?
Yes, just a second. All right, can you see the video?
Hello, and welcome to this virtual symposium supported by Novartis. Joining me, we have a fantastic faculty of Kostas Kostikas and Holger Worley. So I'd like you both maybe to briefly introduce yourselves and add a little bit about what you're going to be talking about. So maybe Kostas?
Hello, David. Hello, Holger. I'm Kostas Kostikas. I'm currently in Ioannina, Greece, and I'm working at the University of Ioannina. It's a great pleasure to be with you on this virtual panel, and I'm going to be discussing about how digital innovation can support us in asthma management.
Heike, could you pause this now, please?
Hello, David. Hello, Kostas. My name is Holger Worley.
Okay, and I don't know what other people's screen is like, and it could just be the internet at home, but it was very jittery, the presentation that I was seeing. But in reality, when we were doing the conference, it was very smooth in terms of the video quality, etc. But I think the thing that was important to note was at this respiratory conference, the client reported to us that the other presentations typically received between 400 and 500 views of the presentation using a Zoom type technology. Their particular presentation received 2,400 views. And obviously the impact that they were making, where they were showing people full form, there was very natural conversation on stage. Each of the presenters knew when it was their turn to talk, which is often a bit of a challenge when you have people in different locations. Illustrates the benefit. Okay, Heike, maybe we can run the other video that I shared with you. And on this other video, this was an in-person conference. It was in Vancouver. It was with Sun Life Financial, and they beamed in on a HoloPresence presentation. Somebody from Toronto who's interacting with their colleague who's on stage with them, and then also with audience members. And it's really here to illustrate the lack of latency and how natural the conversation is.
Hey, Dave.
Hey, Vancouver. Hey, Kevin. How you doing?
Is that yourself?
This is myself here with you in Vancouver on stage.
Welcome. That's it's great. It's great to see you. This works out really well. Where are you?
I am in Toronto, and we should tell your audience this isn't another one of those demos where I'm like not real.
Yeah.
I'm actually really here on stage with you in Vancouver as well.
Wow. It's fantastic. You're looking well.
I was just asking if Dave could see us. Apparently he can.
I can. If anybody wants to try the technology, the experience is pretty much like standing on the stage in Vancouver. It's even 17 degrees and partly cloudy here in Toronto, so it's pretty much the same thing.
You can just use your imagination. Imagine, employee education meetings, benefits meetings, sending your CEO to open up something like these are all. What's amazing is technology is all accessible now.
Hi, Dave. My name's Samantha. How are you?
Hey, good. How you doing, Samantha?
I'm doing well, thank you. Super cool, the technology here. I'm actually blown away. I'm expecting like Captain Kirk or Spock to appear, so it was really well done.
I would go with Captain Kirk, but better looking.
Oh, higher.
I'll just say thank you to everybody in Vancouver. It was awesome to join you on stage.
All right. Thanks, Dave.
Thanks, Kevin.
Well, I think I'll close right there. So thank you very much. It's been a real pleasure this morning.
Okay, that's good. Thank you. So once again, there seemed to be an awful lot of frames that were dropped in, and it could well be just the quality of the internet where I am at home here right now in Toronto. But I once again, as a general rule, it's very, very smooth and very, very natural and quite impactful. So with that, I'll open it up to any questions, or do we move on to the next presenter, Svetlana or Andre?
Thank you very much, Larry. That was mind-blowing in some points. And you have a lot of questions in the chat, actually. I have signed those, and we will address them in the very end after the presentation of Armen. So thank you.
May I just ask one question for
yes,
clarification? The holograms that you project, they are projections of life-size people on a stage or in the box. Are they really 3D, or is it a projection? Because if I would move from here to there, would I see a different picture, or is it just a projection of a two-dimensional picture that looks 3D because it's on a stage?
It is the latter. So we're projecting a video image onto a mesh with a highly reflective screen. And then we are typically have a dark surface with depth behind that subject with light on either side. And because of that, your eye fuses the light that is behind with the light that is the subject to create the illusion of 3D in depth. However, what I will say is the field of view is much bigger than what you think it might be. I came from the movie business. I was with the IMAX Corporation for 22 years, and we were the only 3D game in town for quite a number of years. And the field of view was relatively narrow within theaters for 3D. If you had an auditorium that was showing both 2D and 3D, you used to color the seats, the 3D seats and the 2D seats. In this particular case, we very frequently will have a field of view that would be in the 130 degree, 140 degree range, where you get a sensation of depth.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Larry. And this was actually one of the questions in the chat, the one the one Andre addressed. It was a question of Omar. So Omar, I hope you heard the answer to your question. And we go ahead. Let me introduce one more time Armen Ovanessoff for those who joined later. Armen is a principal director at Accenture Research, and he is one of the authors of very interesting report about immersive technologies and the risk which it brings. So today he will talk about, in his principal presentation, about building a responsible future for immersive technologies, about new risks, responsibilities for business leaders, and role of policymakers in this. Armen, please go ahead.
Thank you very much, Svetlana. And let me very quickly congratulate you, Larry. That was amazing. And just so you know, I didn't have any problems with viewing the videos. They were absolutely fine. So I guess it depends on people's connections. I'm just going to share my screen very quickly again. Check that this works. Please let me know if that's working. And I'm just going to put it on presentation mode. Hopefully that works.
Yes, I can see the presentation, but not in presentation mode yet. Now, yes.
Excellent. Perfect. So hopefully you got from my introduction when setting the context that I genuinely find these technologies extraordinary. The potential is huge, and we saw some of it there. I'm particularly interested in the healthcare and the education and training kind of benefits, because I think that could really transform the way we live and work. But as with all technologies, the benefits they're kind of wrapped up with inbuilt risks as well, right? When you invent a car, you also get the car crash, right? That's part of the thing. And it took decades after the car was invented to come up with proper standard seatbelts, right? And it took decades after that to come up with the airbag, right? So I guess what I'm going to talk about in this section is more about the need to design airbags while you're designing the car, right? Rather than waiting for decades and for millions of people to die and retrospectively try to fix these mistakes. Let's design responsibility and think about the risks as we're designing these tools and technologies, because as we saw, they're growing fast and they're soon going to be part of our everyday lives. So with that, I think it's important to think about what makes these kinds of technologies, these immersive technologies, special and different from other technologies in terms of the risks. And one of them is the threat to intimacy, right? These things are profoundly connected to our personal identity, our behaviors, our thoughts, and I'll get to that in a moment. And other technologies don't seem to have that kind of deep connection to our intimate selves. The second is the unknown mental impact, right? These technologies have a direct connection to our sense of reality, right? They're connected to our mental faculties, our perception of what is real, what isn't. And the truth is, we don't really understand the brain that well. Neuroscience has made huge progress, but there's a lot that we don't know. And therefore, there's a lot we don't know about how the extended impact of these tools will be as we spend more time using them. And the third one is just the incredible power and speed of technology generally these days means that as these things come online and become more available, the speed at which it spreads, the speed at which these things become used, when there are mistakes, it's really difficult to then retrospectively fix them, right? So we're at the kind of that moment where we need to act right from the beginning because the cost of inaction can be extremely high. And I'll talk about that, the different things, because I think it is different with these technologies. All right, so that's a bit of context. What I'm going to do is I'm going to talk through 6 quite specific risks that I think are different from each other that come from these technologies. And then perhaps during the Q&A and during the breakout sessions, we can go more into the actions, both in terms of businesses and in terms of the policy that we can take to confront them. So let's see how that goes. Right, so the first one I'm going to talk about is the misuse of personal data, right? Today, personal data is about your credit card number, your purchase history, your likes, your dislikes, that kind of information. But in a world with extended reality, the data is much more intimate, right? It's about your feelings, your behaviors, your judgments. If you think of the example I gave earlier, you're wearing a VR headset, you're doing some training. Well, the data that's being collected, it's about your choices, your movements, so really intimate stuff. And already, you know, there's more and more biometric data increasingly available about eye movement patterns, DNA profiles, etc. So everything that we are already talking about, all the issues around data privacy, data protection, data ownership, usage, consent, all those things that we already worry about just get magnified that much more in a world with immersive technologies because that data is that much more intimate. Second area, fake experiences. So today we have fake news, right? Whether it's an article or a social media post, already that kind of fake news can lead to physical harm. We've seen that in the physical world, social divisions, even the erosion of kind of civil institutions, right? We've seen about influencing elections and those kinds of things. Well, in a world with extended reality, fake news can actually become fake experiences. It's that much deeper, right? We've already seen deep fakes. I'm sure a lot of you have seen those, how incredibly realistic they are. I remember years ago, the New York Times used to create experiences where you could, for example, be in the war zone. You feel like you're actually in the war zone. And you can imagine how much more compelling that is to really understand the seriousness of the situation. It's an incredible tool to really immerse someone and understand the seriousness of an issue that much more. But then imagine if something happens in that immersive world that isn't real. Say a child is killed, for example, and it's not real. Well, the ultimate issue is, well, how much easier it is to influence people's beliefs and their behaviors in that kind of immersive world and kind of dislodge that perception of what is real and what isn't. So again, it's something we need to just pay attention to. A third area is cybersecurity, right? Today, there's a huge amount of identity theft, affects millions of people. But in a world of extended reality, we're basically just broadening the range of ways that your identity can be put at risk, right? Or even your assets, right? So in some ways, this is simply just the next kind of stage of having security keep up with the threats, right? So banks, for example, now increasingly use voice activated security, or at some point, Some people will try and figure out how to get around that, et cetera, et cetera. So in one way, it's about just keeping up with the risks, but actually there are bigger dangers because of the nature of these tools. Some of the really great uses of these technologies, like surgery that I mentioned earlier, distant surgery, or those hazardous engineering projects, well, they absolutely rely on a safe, secure, constant data flow coming in, right? Well, you have ransomware attacks where people can cut off those streams of data and demand payment before they release them again. Again, these things do happen already. So there's absolutely no reason to think that they wouldn't in that kind of situation. So again, it just opens up the door to amazing opportunities, but with them, very serious risks that kind of accompany them. I'm going to talk about some slightly different risks that are a little bit more to do with these technologies. Tech addiction is a big one. So the World Health Organization already has classified gaming disorder as a formal mental health condition. The truth is, actually, neuroscientists are exploring other potential disorders that can happen with extended periods using these kinds of technologies. We just don't know. This is the thing. There's still a huge amount of research that needs to happen. Just like we don't know a lot about the brain, we don't know a lot about what happens when we play with the brain. So that's something that just needs to be understood much better. Youth in particular are at risk. We can already see just with social media, right? The impact of social media on stress and anxiety in children. It's especially been prevalent during the lockdowns, where people have spent a lot of their lives online. And here's the thing, a lot of that anxiety, a lot of that stress comes from the gap between the kind of perfect world that apparently exists in these social media kind of places, as opposed to the tough reality that is in real life, right? And it's that gap that actually is a huge cause of stress. It's not a real gap, and that gap just gets even more extended in a world of immersive technologies, right? You can imagine how perfect and how enjoyable it is to be in an immersive world. There are already indications of these things happening among youth in Japan, who are years ahead with using these technologies. They're culturally, they have a huge appetite for these kinds of technologies, and there are already issues with youth in Japan wanting to spend too much time in these virtual worlds and not wanting to engage with the real world and the stresses that come with that. Connected to this is antisocial behavior. Again, today on social media, there's a lot of trolling and those kinds of behaviors. We seem pretty unable to track that stuff or enforce it in any kind of meaningful way. Cyberbullying is one of the big issues. I remember Ipsos had a survey a couple of years ago where I think they found that 1 in 5 parents in the world complained that a child was a victim of cyberbullying. I think it was 1 in 4 in America, in the States, and the number was just escalating very, very quickly. Now imagine, what does cyberbullying mean or look like in a virtual world? How much worse is it where you would feel that you're physically being intimidated by actual avatars, right? And there could be multiple of them and that kind of thing. So again, it's an escalation, an exacerbation, a magnification of these kinds of risks that we already have. A really important consideration there is something that scientists call the Proteus effect. And the Proteus effect is about how behaviors in the virtual world can seep into behaviors in the physical world. And apparently this is a real thing, at least to some degree. I described earlier the arm in the ice bucket, for example. There are great things as well, confidence boosting, some of the good trauma therapies that I explained earlier, but there are obviously negative things. We know that in online environments, people behave, let's just say, very badly compared to what they would be prepared to do in real life if they physically were in that situation. And so there's a risk of that seeping happening. I mean, at a very superficial level, some people already complain about their children barking orders at Alexa and those kinds of devices, and how that perhaps is allowing them to bark orders at humans, etc. So again, it's about just tracking how behaviors translate. And the final area I just wanted to touch on, especially in the interest of time, something that I find particularly interesting is the digitally divided worlds. And there's two things here. In one case, it's like with every technology, right? Unequal access to any technology always creates a digital divide, which then results in more economic divides and social divides, right? And when you have something that provides such incredible benefits, like we said about education, healthcare, etc., there's a huge issue if only one segment of the population is able to access those amazing benefits when the rest isn't, right? And so it's about making sure that the extreme benefits don't result in huge divides. And of course, the rollout of technology will never be even, but it does matter what the time lag is of trying to get it to everyone. It does matter what the affordability of access is, right? So again, huge importance on the accessibility, the affordability of the infrastructure, the devices, the tools, and obviously this is an issue that not only businesses, consumers, but very much policymakers have to deal with. But in addition to that traditional digital divide issue, you have something that's specific to these immersive technologies, and that's the idea that, you know, when you're designing a virtual environment, you design it with a view for a very specific purpose. You're trying to teach something, or you're trying to entertain. What you don't do is include a lot of irrelevant things or random things or undesirable things, right? You don't often see, you know, rubbish in the street or homeless people. These things that are real issues in society don't enter that virtual world. Again, not because of any reason other than it's not being designed for that. And the issue is the more time that people spend in these beautiful, perfect virtual worlds, the easier it is for them to disengage from real life problems. And you see these things creeping in. It's a debate that needs to be had. So for example, I remember a couple of years ago, there was an exhibition where a car was being shown, and in the back seat, the windows, they had these incredible immersive displays so that the kids in the car could actually interact with these amazing virtual reality things that were coming from the window. Some people loved it. They thought, this is incredible, this is going to change our lives, it's going to change our vacations, etc. A lot of other people thought this is horrendous, because this is, again, disengaging the children from what's actually on the other side of this window, whether that's good stuff or bad stuff. So again, something that should stimulate debate, conversations in thinking about these. So those are the 6 kind of areas I just wanted to outline. As I said, during the Q&A and during the breakouts, we can talk more about what we can do about them, both businesses, policymakers, society, etc. I will end with a sense, just a question of how prepared we are for these risks, right? Because let's face it, recent experience doesn't bode particularly well, right? If you think of data privacy, cybersecurity, all those issues, Europe is an advanced case, but let's face it, there's a lot of work to be done there. You think of the internet and social media, the impact on, you know, like I said, fake news, mental health issues, bots in social media. What progress have we made, even though those things have been around for a very long time? Even thinking about the gig economy, right? You think about the gig economy that has been around for ages, and yet legislation has been so slow to catch up with what is essentially just 21st century work. And so there is a question about, you know, how if we haven't been able to catch up with the risks and responsibilities that those things provided, let alone today, the things that are happening with artificial intelligence, and we know a lot of the issues around biases, etc. We haven't caught up with that, and now we're even adding on these extended reality risks. It just shows how much this agenda really needs to be tackled, how urgent it is. And the thing I just want to kind of end with, my kind of overarching message with that, is that this is happening. These technologies are booming, like you saw with the data. It will become part of our everyday lives quite suddenly. And the cost of trying to retrospectively fix these issues is going to be horrendous compared to us actually taking the time to design responsibility and ethics into those processes about how these things are designed and also how these things are used right from the start, right? So there's something that we have to do right now. Going back to my previous example, think seat belts, airbags, but add, multiply it by the mental health issues, the societal well-being issues that I've kind of touched upon. So I guess my leaving point is just we need to act on this now. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Armen.
May I briefly take on this call for action of Armen, because it really touches upon this issue of responsible innovation. You said it will come anyway. We need to take action. Who needs to take action, and how could this action be taken? Is it a question of running events like this? Is it a question of starting up a stakeholder initiative, a partnership on responsible augmented reality? How should this action look like? What role does civil society play in this action? And what role could governments or should governments play, or not at all? Please don't put the governments in. No governments will take care of that. We're the good guys. We are industry. We are responsible. So how should it look like?
It's huge, and the truth is it's everyone. As you say, it is business, it is policymakers, it is civil society, because it affects all of us. And the truth is, it's really not happening enough in any of these fields. If we think about business, for example, just simply these risks aren't a compliance thing, right? We think too many of these risks are often treated as checkbox kind of, okay, compliance, we're not doing this, we are doing this. It needs to be much more just about how we go about things. So even the person coding something needs to understand and think about, well, if I'm making this code, if it becomes really successful and scales, how might it affect mental health, broader society, etc.? Those questions have to be part of the natural processes of how we do things, whether you're the CEO of a company or as I say, you're kind of coding. Everyone has a different kind of role to play. Another aspect of it is precisely what you mentioned before, Andre, about who is involved. So we know, for example, when you with AI and the ethics in artificial intelligence, increasingly people are setting up boards and committees and bringing in experts on ethics, etc., to make sure that their AI systems have that component. Absolutely, and that would also be true for these kinds of technologies, but you need even more people. You need to bring more people to that table. You need people who understand neuroscience or behavioral theories and those kinds of aspects that we're talking about, mental health. They need to be part of those boards, ethics committees, etc., in designing these things. So those are examples of things for business.
Well, we've done some research on such kind of multi-stakeholder initiatives in very different areas, because in many cases during the last 10 years, there were some actors from civil society, from the business sector saying we need to talk. And then all of these multi-stakeholder initiatives, they depend on two issues: legitimacy, who's involved, whom do they represent, and effectiveness, what comes out. Who could take action to set up such a multi-stakeholder initiative in this area? Who would be the first ones where you would say, if they are involved, it's legitimate and we can trust that it will be effective?
Well, some of this is already happening, so it depends in which areas. So there are groups, for example, of neuroscientists, ethicists, etc., who are already looking at these things. They tend to be academic groups, etc. So that's one world, and places like the World Economic Forum have particular committees that they've created of experts from all these different sectors and industries to talk about these things. That's hugely important and has to happen. But that's different from what I was describing earlier, which is a business themselves taking it upon themselves to think about who are the people that I need in my company or externally joining a board or something with my company to look at these. So, for example, the issues that we were talking about to understand connections to mental faculties, etc., that's a bigger issue that policymakers, academics, scientists should be working on. That benefits everybody. But that's different from the kind of committee that a business would set up, which is specifically about, okay, we are building a virtual reality training tool. Let's make sure that we design it in the right way that it doesn't cause harm, that it brings benefits.
Let me bring in some questions we received before. Let me bring also Larry into our discussion. We received a question from Edward Zemba, who's president and CEO of Link2VR, a US-based company that deals with augmented reality and business. And he asked for collaborative efforts against cyberbullying. There he addressed Armen, but he also asked Larry about integrating ARTH holographic stages, holoboxes, whatever, with Microsoft Mesh. Do you plan to do that?
Well, we're open to applications of the technology, and especially the virtual global stage. It's just think of it as a main stage production of any streaming service that's available. There are certain platforms that are more focused on richer quality video and audio playback that we typically would recommend if you were planning an event or a presentation or a discussion of some sort. However, we've worked with all the major players in different conferences and meetings, training sessions, etc. So, the introduction of Mesh 2 weeks ago was rather interesting. The media was somewhat mixed, in terms of the stage that it's actually at today. Everybody's extremely excited about the potential of the platform. But one of the things that differentiates us, at least today, is that we create the illusion of 3D without the need for glasses and headsets. And even in my IMAX days, when we were pioneering 3D movie playback, the #1 complaint from consumers was, I don't want to wear the glasses. And obviously we saw that with the rollout of 3D televisions. Almost nobody used the 3D glasses. However, in other applications, people have embraced it. And of course, the technology is just evolving at such an incredible pace right now that things are becoming much more comfortable. And the glasses that people will be wearing are glasses like we all are wearing here right now. And we'll just get used to it. So, our software is really all about enriching high quality video and audio playback with a low level of latency, and we're open to working with whoever will benefit from that.
There were two questions addressing costs to a certain extent. It comes from Helmut Spudig, whom I know from previous video interviews. He was Vice President of Corporate Communication and Responsibility of T-Mobile Austria. And he asked the question, what about the costs for these holoboxes, holostages, and how will it develop in the next 5 years? And then Daria Albrecht, who's Innovation Hunter and Open Innovation Professional in Hamburg, asked the question, would it be possible to build some kind of holoboxes everywhere for small and medium-sized enterprises they can rent for a certain amount of time, and then they can make use of it? Or is it just an application for large stages, for large events, for large companies?
No, it's like all technology. It starts off really expensive, and the costs gradually come down, and then all of a sudden, the more players get involved, and the costs come down, and adoption happens, and the cost comes down significantly. When I joined ARTH Media 3 years ago, the starting price to do an event with us was $85,000. Now we do some virtual events for $12,000 and $15,000. So that the cost is really coming down in a significant way. That example that I gave you, linking 5 corporate offices in different parts of the world and with a significant travel savings. I mean, the reality is that for both a full capture and full display, fully kitted out, well under $100,000 US, and for $38 a day, they have unlimited transmissions between the various offices. So it becomes pretty darn cost efficient. The application that you described, I think, will happen relatively soon, where there will be organizations that will see an opportunity to rent either the capture or the display by the hour, and the economics are massively compelling. And so I could see that happening like in the next year or two.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. And from the chat box, we have one more question to Larry and one more question to Armen. So, Larry, another question from Daria Albrecht, actually. If you have some statistics, I think it's a hard one, on how the HoloPresentation improved the numbers, such as more deals, more attention, comparing to the simple virtual presentation with some agile whiteboards.
Yeah, well, I mean, I shared in my presentation some research that was done by clients of ours where they saw significant increases in engagement and in entertainment value, but most importantly, a significant increase in retention of content. And why do you make a presentation? So that people will absorb the information you're trying to share, which is really the whole point. But my favorite little anecdote around this was that there's a global asset manager who typically has used our technology quite a bit for client presentations. So they started using it for big conferences, 5,000 people, and they would have a portfolio manager beam in who didn't have to leave his desk, could leave for 1 hour as opposed to 3 days to make a 1 hour presentation. And that went over very, very well. But then they started using it for their key client presentations, groups of 30 to 70 people, where they would have 4 or 5 people presenting live and 1 or 2 people presenting holographically. And those people who normally would be presenting live with their peers scored dramatically better than they do when they actually are there in person. And in one case, the head of quants for one of these organizations came into our studio on a day I didn't expect him to be there, and I happened to be there in Toronto, and I said, what are you doing here today? And he said, well, I'm part of a presentation that's happening in San Francisco. I said, well, you live in San Francisco. And he said, yeah, I know, but I was just in Dublin and I'm on my way back. And I said, oh, you couldn't get there in time. He said, no, I stopped in Toronto because I always score higher when I present as a hologram.
That is great, Larry. Thank you. And one more question to Armen. Actually, 2 more questions. One is a comment from Edward Zemba, who gives, he says that it is a great point on cyberbullying, Armen. And he also saying that imagine if Hollywood approached the entertainment industry with a similar mindset. And it's that much more important in extended reality, especially for our children who will be driving the adoption curve. So I would join to this question. It is interesting how children, in comparison to us, they did not live in the world before virtual augmented reality and can compare. So they will already grow in this world where it will be quite widespread and implemented. So how it will be working for them?
Yes, well, people would, if we imagine going back in time, people would ask the same maybe about a mobile phone or a computer. It's the same question, just trying to imagine how will this happen. Looking back, it seems obvious, but looking forward, it's a little bit harder. I think this is where that idea of thinking about the risks in advance is the important thing. That's why these kinds of exercises are useful. And just to be really clear about it, most of these are completely unintentional, right? If you, an example I would use, it was a company who was designing virtual reality training for young children as part of their corporate social responsibility things. Really great idea, lovely idea, especially because it was focused on teaching STEM skills, science and data and things to young girls in particular. And it was very near the launch when someone realized, hold on these boxes for the VR headsets, it says these shouldn't be used below a certain age.
Yeah, maybe some reflection on the 3 calls of my name. I had some further discussion.
Sorry, is there a part of a question? Or maybe it was just off mute. And so they had to redesign the whole thing. They redesigned it for people of an older kind of age rather than the children, which was fine. But the point was they were trying to do something really good and something great. And so that just reinforces that idea of let's think about these things in advance. Let's get the right people involved right from the start to make sure we plan things correctly.
There were some more questions about the collaboration of the different parts of the system. So there is the one part that takes care of the recording one. This was a question to Larry. There was one part which takes care of the projection. What else? What else partners do you need is there a special place for other industry system providers, service providers, network operators? Who needs to team up to deliver the service of holographic telepresence at the very end?
Yeah, well, as I mentioned in our presentation, almost all of the equipment that we use is off-the-shelf equipment, so it's readily available everywhere. The only parts that are unique to us are our server technology, the software that allows us to transport these data packs over the internet, and our screen technology, and then the expertise on staging. You know, how best to capture a person, how best to light them and whatnot in terms of playback and for presentations, and then how best to display them, especially for a larger scale event where there are live people on stage and holograms on stage and other graphics and there's revolving speakers, etc. So we have expertise around that. Having said that, you know, our focus as a company is to drive innovation to make it simpler to operate, you know, and more as broadly available as possible at the lowest possible cost, because that's how we get adoption. And our business model really is around having licensing fees around transmission. And so, you know, we don't really care to sell hardware. We do, because it enables the technology to work. But for example, you know, most universities have green screen capture for television production they do and other means, you know. So all they need to do is just add our server and they're good to go, you know. It used to be that when we did an event, we would send 3-5 people to actually do all the staging and operate all the equipment, etc. And we've taken what was in 4 pieces of hardware and put it into 1. And so that 1 technician can actually operate. And by the way, you know, during the pandemic, one thing that was amazing is we've been doing events all around the world, and we hire local AV specialists and we train them remotely and they can deliver, and we haven't had any failures. So it's all those little steps that are, you know, just very natural in the innovation of any kind of an adoption of a technology. But we will continue to do events because it's a profitable business for us, and it's great marketing for many people. In fact, I just noticed a chat in here, somebody was asked saying, hey, I was at an event at Imperial College London and saw your technology, and how much is it to use it? But so it's great marketing. But really, the focus of our company is creating networks globally where people use it as a tool to enhance communication every day. You know, we think that we are rehumanizing digital communication by not making it artificial, but making it as lifelike as possible.
Will you need 5G? Do you need 5G? Will 5G be a step forward in your technology, or does it work right now as well and not necessary?
Well, it's a very good question, because as I said earlier, we made a lot of money demonstrating the potential benefits of 5G technology. And the reality is we only get a fraction of the pipeline. The benefit, of course, of 5G is we're going to get way more reliable. It's just a much bigger pipe. And so consequently, it's going to take an awful lot more users to overwhelm the system. Where we would, you know, potentially have risk is if, you know, we're in a scenario. So typically to stream one of our video streams, we only need 10 megabits up and down. And I've done presentations into Stockholm as an example where, you know, I was 5 megabits going into the Sheraton Hotel, and I only had 1.5 coming back, and we didn't lose the signal. And I did, you know, live Q&A for 30 minutes with business school deans from around the world. So the perception is much greater. Pipeline is required, and obviously that will be beneficial because there just might be much more bigger pipe for everybody.
Okay.
Thank you very much. And I think we're perfectly in time to continue our discussion in the smaller groups. And we have this unique opportunity actually to ask direct questions to Armen and to Larry, because we will split in 2 groups. This would be rather informal discussion on everything what we're saying here. So Larry will remain in this main session for his discussion, and Armen will go to the breakout session. In order to join this breakout session, in the button of your menu in Zoom, as you see now in the screen, you will have this new button appeared, which is called Breakout Rooms. And to join this room with Armen, you have to just click on this join a breakout room. And you will be automatically in the breakout room with Armen. So the first group remains in the main session with Larry, and the second, for risks and challenges of virtual reality with Armen, goes to breakout session. Please, if you have some question on this, on how it works, write it in the chat or ask your moderator. In the first group, Andre will remain as moderator. In the second group, Madeleine Taylor will join. So yeah, please let us know if you don't have yet, Catherine, this breakout room option, but it will appear in the second. Heike will activate this.
When we open the breakout rooms, let me briefly still advertise our next dialogue.
Yes,
our next dialogue will be on skills and careers mid-April. If you're interested and you're already registered to our platform, you will get an automatic invitation. We also plan for one more before summer break, vaguely thinking about the issue of mental health and work-life balance in remote working. So if you have a certain feeling after...
Okay, there was some problem. We couldn't hear the last sentences. But yes, in mid-April, you'll have automatic letter if you registered on the platform about our next dialogue number 4, actually. So we will be very glad to see you there as well. And Anu Madgavkar will talk there, and Barbara Stottinger will represent their her report.